If trying to exercise has only left you feeling worse off, crashing for days until you quietly gave up on movement, this session is for you. Hi, my name is Dr. Kara Wada. I'm a quadruple board certified allergy, immunology, lifestyle medicine physician. I also live with an autoimmune disease called Sjögren's and something called dysautonomia. This talk comes from our 5th annual virtual Sjögren Summit, and I call it Stronger with Sjögren's. The reality is you have not been lazy, and none of this was just in your head. If you once pushed too hard and paid for it with a brutal flare, that fear is not irrational. It is a memory. So in this session, we're going to talk about how you build real strength gently on terms your body can accept, training with a dial rather than an on-off switch, and why your rest days are doing real work. You have permission to go gently. And if this helps you, make sure to subscribe. Check out the description below for more resources. In the meantime, let's get started. Welcome to the kickoff of day 2. We are talking about Stronger with Sjögren's, using gentle strength training to fight fatigue, pain, and bone loss. Before we dive in, one important note: everything I'm going to share today is meant to educate and is not medical advice. These conversations are here to help support your discussions with your own care team and does not replace individual medical advice. If you live with Sjögren's disease, you have very likely become an expert at conserving energy. And this is a very sensible, understandable instinct. When you are exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't touch, the obvious move is to try to conserve, to rest more, to do less, to save yourself for the things that truly matter most. So you may cancel the walk with your friend, skip an errand, you sit down whenever you can because standing also costs something, and you learn to budget your body like a bank account that never is out of this danger zone of being overdrafted. And for a while, that careful conservation feels like the responsible thing to do. But the part that creeps up on us so slowly that we often barely notice it when it's happening is that circle of what feels possible starts to shrink. And it becomes a little smaller and smaller as the months go on. The trip upstairs that you used to make without thinking becomes something that you plan around. Dinner out gets declined because the thought of getting ready and going and being out all just seems like it would cost more than we can spare. You're not imagining that your world has narrowed. Often it has, and it has for very understandable reasons. What I want to offer to you today, gently, is that some of that ground is recoverable. This is a hard truth that took me a long time to make peace with, both as a physician and as someone who lives with this disease myself. Rest alone has not fixed your exhaustion, and there's a reason for that. When we protect ourselves by moving less and less, our muscles slowly grow weaker. Our stamina shrinks, and the smallest tasks start to cost more than they used to. The walk to the mailbox that was easy last year may leave you winded this year. We end up more fragile, more easily wiped out, and more afraid to move, which leads to moving even less. And it's a spiral. It's not a failure of willpower. It's simply what happens to a body that has been told with love and the best of intentions to stand down. I want to say something directly to the part of you that is afraid of this conversation. If you've pushed yourself before and paid for it with a brutal flare, your fear of exercise is not irrational. It is a memory. Your body learned that effort can have a cost, an enormous cost, and it has been trying to keep you safe ever since. And I am not going to ask you to ignore that fear, and I am not going to ask you to push through pain. The approach I want to share with you today is built around that fear and with respect for it. The right kind of movement, done in a way that fits a body with Sjögren's disease, is one of the most powerful tools you have. It belongs in the same category as your medications and your rest, as a part of how you care for yourself. That is what our theme means when it says Stronger with Sjögren's. It means building a real strength in partnership with your body on terms your body can accept. So here's where we're going together today. First, I will show you what the research has actually found with people who live with Sjögren's disease and when they begin to move in different ways. Then I'll give you 3 principles for doing this well in a body like ours. And I'll name the common traps that tend to send us a few steps backwards. And I'll talk about the part that matters the most, which is how to keep going. Let me start with the evidence, because I do not want you to take any of this on faith. When researchers have studied exercise in people with Sjögren's disease, the results have been genuinely encouraging. Gentle, well-dosed strength training and walking programs eased fatigue and pain, improved daily function, and lifted quality of life. When they looked closely, resistance training, the kind where you work your muscles against some form of resistance, stood out from the rest. In one analysis, it was the single type of exercise that was even associated with improvement in disease activity itself, not only in how people felt. So I want to make that concrete, because a phase like improved quality of life can kind of wash right over us. What it looked like in these studies: people climbing stairs with less dread, people with a little more energy left at the end of the day to spend with their families rather than collapsing the moment their obligations were met, people whose pain loosened its grip just enough to let them sleep a bit better. That's the prize here, and it's worth being specific about, because it's the kind of prize that makes an ordinary day feel that little bit bigger, little more livable again. I want to pause on the safety question, because I know it is the one underneath all the others. Across these trials, exercise was consistently safe. The studies did not see disease flares triggered by the programs. They did not see disease activity worsen, and they did not report serious harms. Now, these were supervised, carefully dosed programs, and that matters. So everything I share today comes with the same starting point, which is to begin with your own care team. With that said, the picture the research paints is pretty reassuring. Your body is still trainable, even with an autoimmune disease, and the capacity to grow stronger did not leave when your diagnosis came. Here's the gap worth knowing about. When researchers looked at what people with Sjögren's are actually doing for a physical activity, most were meeting the general recommendations for aerobic activity, things like walking. But very few were doing any strength work at all, and almost none were doing the balance training that helps protect us against falls. So strength is the piece most of us are missing, and it's the piece with the most to offer. I also want to talk honestly about our bones, because, well, one, we put it in the title for a reason, but it tends to stay invisible until something breaks. Bone loss is common in Sjögren's disease. In one study, roughly 2 out of 3 patients had measurable thinning of their bones, either osteopenia or the more advanced form called osteoporosis. In a larger group of more than 400 patients, close to 1 in 5 had osteoporosis, and fragility fractures were already showing up. Several things drive this. Age and menopause are the biggest, and most of us in this community are women. Many of us are moving through this transition. Steroids, if you've needed them, also take a toll on our bones. So does a longer history with the disease. So do higher inflammation levels over time. Low vitamin D, which is very common in Sjögren's, also adds to this. So the thread running through all of this is the same chronic inflammation we keep coming back to is quietly working against our skeleton. The reason I'm willing to spend time on this, even though it's not the most exciting subject, is that bone loss is silent. It doesn't hurt, and there are no symptoms that tell you it's happening up until the moment when we fall and break our wrist, a hip, or a bone in our spine gives way. For a lot of people, that one fracture becomes a turning point that takes months to recover and shakes their confidence for far longer. I would much rather we talk about protecting our bones now while it's still quiet than waiting for our body to raise the subject the hard way. Now, I want to be straight with you about what we know and what we do not, because, well, you deserve that, and because hype really doesn't help anyone. No study has yet followed people with Sjögren's disease and measured whether exercise directly builds their bones. That specific research has not been done. What we do have is strong. We have powerful evidence in postmenopausal women who do make up a good portion of this community, and that in that community, the right resistance and weight-bearing exercise builds bone and meaningfully lowers fracture risk over time. We have similar evidence in related conditions, and we have the Sjögren's disease studies showing that exercise is safe here, and that it can calm inflammation, which is part of what drives bone loss in the first place. So the honest summary is this: the case that movement protects your bones is well-grounded and reasonable to expect, and this Sjögren's specific proof is still catching up. I would rather tell you this plainly than promise more than what science has earned. So how do we actually do this in a real body on real days? I'm not going to hand you a prescription, a specific set or number of reps or a rigid weekly plan, because the specifics belong to you and to your care team. They will look different for every person listening. What I can give you are 3 principles to build upon. Principle number 1 is safety. First and foremost, before you lift anything, have a conversation with your care team about what's right for you. This very likely may be your primary care physician, physical therapist that maybe you work with. Some things we should be thinking about. How is your heart health? How are your joints? How is your fatigue? What's your flare pattern? Do you have a history of osteoporosis or a history of a fracture? Because in those situations, some movements do need to be modified to protect your spine. And the gentler end of things generally is the smarter place to begin. Vitamin D, calcium, your medications are also part of this picture too, and they're worth raising with your clinician, especially if you have spent time on steroids. Safety is what makes everything else possible, because a plan that lands you in a flare is a plan that you are not going to stick with. I know that for some of you, even the phrase get clearance from your care team lands with a sigh, because getting a thoughtful answer to an exercise question in a 10-minute appointment is its own challenge. So let me make it a bit easier. A simple conversation is enough. You can name what you're hoping to try, a gentle strength work and some walking, and ask whether there's anything specific to your situation you should be careful with. If you have access to a physical therapist or an exercise professional who understands autoimmune disease, gosh, that is gold. It's worth asking for a referral if there's someone available that you may consider touching base with too. Starting is allowed and frankly should be modest. The bar to begin is much lower than the fear makes it actually seem. The second principle is specificity, which simply means doing the right kinds of movement that give you what you actually need. For most people with Sjögren's disease, that's a blend of 3 things. Some whole body strength work to rebuild muscle that conservation has worn away. Some balance work, which is most overlooked of all and quietly protects us from the falls that turn thin bones into broken ones. And a gentle aerobic base, like walking or swimming, for your heart, your energy, and your mood. The strength work does not have to look like a gym. For one person, it might be standing up from a chair a few extra times. For another, it might be light resistance bands or hand weights at a kitchen counter. For another, it might be simply body weight movements. Let me say a little bit more about balance, because it's the piece almost no one is doing, and it may carry the most protective power in the long run. Balance work can be small enough to fold into your day, like standing on one foot while you brush your teeth, holding onto the sink, or practicing rising from a chair without using your hands. These sound almost too simple to matter, which is exactly why they get skipped. And yet they are training the very thing that keeps a stumble from becoming a fracture. The aerobic piece can be just as humble. A short walk counts. A walk broken into 3 small pieces across the day counts. If you're able to do them after your meals, this also can be helpful at regulating your blood sugar. Off topic, but helpful little note on timing. None of this has to look impressive to be doing real work, and the strength and weight-bearing pieces are where bone protection lives, because bone grows stronger when it's asked to do a little bit of work. Now, I owe you some honesty here too. The strongest bone results in research came from higher intensity training, and that's not something to attempt on your own or to copy from a video, particularly if your bones are already thin. The right intensity for you is genuinely individual. It should be set with your care team or qualified professionals who understand autoimmune disease and supervise it first if you're able. Starting gently and building slowly is a safe and legitimate place to begin. The third principle is one I care about the most, and it is a self-compassionate progression. Your body with Sjögren's disease does not move in a straight line, and your training cannot either. Some days you will have more to give. Some days a flare will take it all back. Both are part of the process. So I want you to think of yourself as having a dial rather than a switch. On a good day, you turn up the effort a little bit. On a hard day, you turn it down, or you rest entirely, and the rest counts as part of the work. Progress here is measured in small wins repeated over time. The slightly easier flight of stairs, the grocery bag, walking it in doesn't wipe you out, in the afternoon that you still had something left. Let me make that dial real with the situation that derails most of us, which is flare. Picture a week where you've been doing well, you're building a little momentum, and then you end up with a cold your grandkiddo or kiddo brought home, or overdid it on a weekend out with friends and seems to flatten us. That is a pattern that most of us fall into, and often we will stop completely. We will feel like we failed and the guilt will pile on, and 3 weeks later, we still haven't gone back. The self-compassionate version moves differently. During the flare, you rest without guilt because rest is the right training choice that week. As you come out of it, you start again lower than you think you need to. Maybe at half of what you were doing before your flare, and you build back from there over a week or 2. A flare like that is part of the long arc of getting stronger. Learning to come back gently again and again is the real skill here. And more than anything you manage to do on your strongest day, it's that showing up and coming back to that is the most important. There is no place for pushing through pain in this, and there is no prize for punishing yourself. Gentleness and consistency are what build a body that lasts. Noticing what these 3 principles give back to you, a voice in what your own care looks like, choices you get to make day to day, and real agency over a body that has so often felt like it was making decisions without you. So let me save you some heartache by naming the traps I have watched people fall into, myself included, by helping you see them ahead of time, because that's half the work. The first trap is all or nothing thinking. We get inspired, often on a rare good day when our energy tricks us into feeling extra capable, and we go hard. Maybe we go hard for a few days, and then our body retaliates, and we conclude that exercise is not for us. The fix is to start far smaller than what feels impressive, and to stay small even on the days you feel like you could do more. A few minutes truly counts. The progress comes from showing up gently and often in a way that you can repeat next week and the week after that. The second trap is comparison, especially the kind that lives on our screens. The routines we see for and from healthy bodies, or even from other people with Sjögrens who are at different points in their journey, are not your measure. The fitness world is built around bodies that recover quickly and predictably, which may not be the body you're working with. And holding yourself to that standard is a setup for discouragement. Your plan has to fit your body, your energy, and your day. Borrowing someone else's plan is one of the fastest ways to end up hurt or discouraged, and discouragement is the thing most likely to make us stop. The third trap is ignoring recovery and our nervous system, and that's where we connect back to where we started yesterday. Your nervous system and your muscles are on the same team, and here's the part that surprises people. The strength is built during recovery. When you rest after you've worked out and done some strength work, your body repairs the muscles and brings it back a little bit stronger, which means your rest days are doing real work. And if you are running on a nervous system that is stuck in high alert with no real recovery, you're asking your body to build on a foundation that's still shaking. So the rest, the sleep, the slow exhales we talked about yesterday are the other half of the training. It's the half where the building actually happens. So let me leave you with this. For most of us, the hard part was never really the information. Somewhere inside, you already suspected that moving your body might help. The hard part is doing it consistently, especially on the days it feels pointless, and doing it without feeling utterly alone in this effort. That's the piece I most want you to hold on to. The people who keep this up over the long run almost always have one thing in common. They have support, and they're not carrying it by themselves. In the meantime, thank you for trusting me with this time. You have been carrying so much, and the fact that you are still here, still looking for ways to feel better, tells me a great deal about your strength. Your body is still capable of growing stronger, gently, on your terms, and you do not have to do it alone. Let's keep going and be stronger together.